Okay, so on today's video, we're doing a how-to. I've been promising Eric from Great Northern Quivers for a while I was going to show this. It's how to properly install a Great Northern strap mount quiver. There's a few odds and ends that make it sit on the bow a lot nicer, and keep in mind you can put these on 3-piece bows, 1-piece bows, pretty much anything, and it is super easy, but there's a few key things that make it sit good versus funky. So those few things I'm going to go over here, and hopefully it goes well. Hopefully the wind's fairly mild in the video. But let's get started. Okay, so right here I have my PL. It's a 16-inch riser. That's only crucial because of this new quiver that Eric has started making. This is, I don't know if it would still be in the prototyping phase, but he says it is going to continue. And it is the 1-piece quiver with a longer bar right here, so it fits your 16-inch riser area better. The traditional longbow quiver was a much shorter section for like your ASLs and your hill style longbows. So for the most part, most of you are just going to want to buy this adjustable one. So what this can do, this is the quiver that's coming off the bow. Off real quick. What this gives you the ability to do is, if your riser is shorter, you can shrink it right down to a small package. Now obviously, like, you would slide these rubber guys to the ends and make it all happy, but that's what you can do with the current adjustable one, or you can extend it as far as it can go for, you know, your 3-piece risers. So when you get your new strap mount quiver, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to look at your longbow or whatever type of bow you're putting it on and kind of make a mental note about where your fade outs are. Now this bow is a horrendous example because the fade outs are black and so is the core wood or the carbon, but you have this thick section of the riser right here, and then right about there where it becomes the same thickness all the way down the limb, that's roughly where your fade out ends. And you want to be on the inside of that. So you could mount this quiver anywhere in this vicinity and not affect the bow, but once you get out up into here, you're in dangerous territory. And then obviously, same deal on the bottom. In here, you're fine. If you get out into here, you're pushing dangerous territories, but in here is okay. On this particular bow, when I had the adjustable, I just went to the ends of these overlays, and it worked out perfectly because that lines up onto the fade out. And then I knew my quiver was in the same spot every time. So that is where you want to mount them. So when you get your quiver, first thing you want to do, take these straps off, and then you got to pay attention to how these, just remember it goes from the hook to the hood, and from the pad to the hood, and then from the pad to the gripper. And you can take those guys right off, and then you'll just have your area those sit on exposed. And this is the part that everybody skips and what gets you into some funky territory. So once you have your quiver without the straps on it, the next thing you need to do, and this is going to be kind of hard to do by myself, but you need to lay the quiver on the bow in roughly the area you want to have it sit. And can you see how there's that gap right there and the foot's not laying on the limb nicely? What you want to do is you're going to end up bending that tab so it sits right on the limb. You don't want any angle. You want it to sit nice and happy. If you don't do this step, what you're going to get is when you mount this quiver, it's going to want to bow like this, because these pads will end up sitting flat and it'll end up flexing the connector wire right here. So that's why this step is crucial, and it makes a big difference. So the easiest way I have found to do this part, I'm assuming most of you have a Leatherman, Phillips, any type of screwdriver will work. So essentially all you got to do, take your pliers from your Leatherman, go up through the foot like this, and you just give it a little tweak, and now instead of laying flat, it is laying up at an upward angle like that. Come down on the other end, put your pliers in there, give it that same tweak, and now you're at an upward bend. Now, this will vary per bow. So depending on if it's a radical reflex deflex, depending on where you're sitting on the riser, all those things will play in how much you have to bend that up. But from there, you then grab your bow and you test your fit. So on this one, I did a really good job on my hood side, and I went a little bit too far, but not terrible, on my gripper side. Now, since I went too far on my gripper side, I'll pretend this is a used quiver at this point. Get my bow out of the way here. And say you had this on a really aggressive longbow where you needed this bent way up here, and now you don't need it bent as far. Just get your Leatherman back out, go at it the other way, and just tweak it down, and that drops that angle. So when you're switching quivers, this is a good thing to do. Now with that said, I do find once you find a happy spot, most bows within reason, you can get away with a little bit of play. But you would definitely want to get them off that flat angle and make them lay as flat on that limb as you can. Or the riser, I shouldn't be saying limb. Okay, so now that I have adjusted that one, we'll go back and look again. And you can see that one sits pretty good, that one sits pretty good, and that bar is fairly straight. I actually might need to move my bottom one back a little bit the other way. I went too far. This is only difficult because I'm trying to record it. Normally it takes like 2 seconds to do this, so bear with me. Luckily I have this log out here that works perfect as a workbench. Alright, so now the bar is perfectly straight. I have it exactly where I want it to sit, and those feet are sitting perfectly flat. So that is what you're looking for. Okay, so another note I want to make, this is the adjustable one. When you're deciding where to put it on your bow, myself, I like to go as close to my fade outs as I can and feel safe. However, there is some advantage of doing it as close to the fade outs and closer in. So when you get closer to your fade outs, you're expanding this quiver hood to gripper distance as far as you can. So you're going to be spacing it out on the arrow more, so your arrows will feel more stable, and there will be less movement for them to, you know, wiggle and whatnot, and maybe cause a little bit more feel in the shot. Conversely, the closer you go together, the distance between hood to gripper is closer, obviously, and what you'll do is you'll splay out your feathers just a little bit more, so you'll have a little better feather clearance. Depending on what you're shooting, I've personally never found that that's too much of an issue. And you gotta remember, this is changing minutely, so it's not gonna be the end of the world either way, but you know, if you're shooting big 5.5 inch high back feathers, you might need to move your quiver a little closer just to give yourself a little bit more clearance. Okay, so we got the bow back on the log. We have our tabs properly adjusted. So the next thing you need to do is put your straps back on, and like I said, from the tab to the hood, and they just slip right back on over the pad right there, whatever you want to call it. Do that for both of them. Sorry, once again, this is surprisingly tricky to do by yourself and film and keep it in the screen. So now you have both of your straps back on the quiver, and the quiver is ready to mount on the bow. Okay, so on this particular quiver, it still lines up with my fade outs, or my overlays. Kind of hard to see, I apologize. So find where you want it on the bow, move it down just a skosh, and then I find this easiest to do in your lap. I'm sure if you have some sort of bow vise, it'd make it easy. And this is where my OCD comes into play. But my favorite way to strap these on is to come up and over and to cover half the pad on the first round, then cover the whole pad, and then on your third time around just find the hole that matches up the best. And it gives you a fairly clean layer of wraps, and it works good. I've never had an issue with it. And then we'll do the same thing on this bottom one. So once again, if I can find a good way to stand, let me tilt the camera down a little bit. Come around and over, roughly half. Cover the other half of the pad, and on your third time around, find the hole. Now, Bob, when he owned Great Northern, told me you should never really oblong this hole. That's a sign that you've gone too tight with it. So I've kind of run with that. But now you have a fairly clean system. And you'll notice I have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so I'm about even side to side. And you can tell that that quiver is sitting nice and happy on this bow, and there's no weird bending of this bar or anything, and the quiver sits nice and parallel. So that is that. So that's getting the quiver on the bow. There's a few other things to make note. You can slightly adjust how far this quiver sits off of the bow here. If you have wider limbs, you can kind of shift those pads to the inside or the outside of your limb. Same with the top. So those are things you can play with to get it really fine-tuned to how you like it. This particular bow, you just got to sit them in the middle, and it is what it is. But overall, it's hard to beat a Great Northern, and they are great quivers. One thing I did want to mention, when you first get one of these quivers, the new hood foam, I know Great Northern uses it, I know Selway uses it. When you first take your arrows out, of course it's not doing it on this one, but sometimes you get a little suction cup pop noise. The moment you put broadheads in there, it frees up that foam just the perfect amount, and you're good to go. And it works excellent. I will show you the finished product here in a second when I get my arrows in the quiver. Okay, so here's the finished product on my PL. Nice happy sitting quiver. Looks great, matches the bow good. Eric does a lot of custom stuff with hoods and whatnot. But yeah, super simple, easy to do. Like I said, the video is going to make it look harder than it is. Filming it is not easy. One last thing I wanted to mention, if this is going to be the only bow you put it on, feel free to trim off the excess here. It's just there for a few different size risers and whatnot. So I will cut it off one hole past where I'm actually strapping it to. So that is basically how you install a Great Northern Quiver. I hope this was helpful. Eric, I hope this works for you. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to get a hold of me, and I'm sure obviously you can get a hold of Eric at Great Northern if there's any other questions. So with that said, thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful. And if you'd like more like this, let me know. Thank you. Bye.